All right. Welcome, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. I know there'll be folks that'll still be jumping on maybe in the next few minutes, but we're glad you're all here with us today. We've got a great webinar ahead from HireClicks about employer branding, critical to your success in 2022. Always critical, but especially right now. And my name is Kevin Grossman, president of Talent Board, and we appreciate HireClicks and their support of the Candidate Experience Awards. Before I introduce Neil officially, I just wanted to share a couple of housekeeping items. We are recording this, but we're glad you're here as well, live and to engage. Please make sure to ask questions. If you've got questions based on information that Neil's sharing, please do ask them. We will get to those towards the end. We'll have plenty of time for questions and banter at that point. And we'll make sure to get this out to you all too tomorrow after the webinar is all rendered and processed and etc. So what I want to do now is go ahead and introduce the founder and CEO of HireClicks. And Neil, why don't you go ahead and go? I think you have a photo slide, right?
I might have a photo.
And I think it was the second one. I thought I saw it. There you go.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna turn it over to you, Neil. I'll come back at the end for questions, but take it away. It's all yours.
Sure. Sounds good. For those of you that aren't familiar with HireClicks, I won't spend a lot of time on this, but we are a recruitment advertising agency. I started the agency in 2010. That's the only time I've ever worn a bow tie, so I felt like it was worth putting on LinkedIn. And our business is based on helping our clients figure out the right place to make investments in order to drive applicants and build their employer brand. And in 2010, we started that. I had come out of e-commerce since the mid 90s, but spent a bunch of time at monster.com working on the internal advertising agency at Monster, driving job seekers when they're out in the wild on CNN, ESPN, the Food Network, and really advertising to them to say, come to Monster and look for a job. And so we're really born out of consumer marketing. And it's funny because it's coming full circle right now. This in this webinar, we'll talk about leveraging consumer advertising channels, building employer brand. And back at Monster, our job was to use that really well-known, well-recognized job board brand in the mid-2000s to make sure that we captured people's interest when they were searching for a job. How do we catch them in the moment when we could get their attention? So a lot of what we talk about today this is just the summary from before, but we're at a point right now after COVID as we're getting hopefully near the end of COVID, that it's forced everybody to think about different strategies and different things that are important. So as we talk about employer branding, we think about it in three separate stages as a marketing agency. One is, do you understand your employee value proposition? What is your promise to the employees that you're bringing on board? And if you don't have that baked yet, or if you feel like that's squishy, or you've been through an acquisition, there has to be a significant amount of time spent on that, just making sure you identify who you are, what you offer, what the promise is. Second is, that's really important to that, is how do we start building out employer brand assets? One of the things that I think is really important in doing so is to make sure you have a really strong relationship with your corporate marketing friends. Our employer brand is a subset of our corporate brand. So how do we make those two feel like they're part of the same family? And that takes collaboration. And sometimes that's a challenge. Sometimes that's difficult to get the attention of corporate marketing. Corporate marketing is trying to drive, PR and trying to drive sales and leads and things for the top line. And sometimes getting that attention is really difficult to do. And, I think that it's important to try and make the time in order to be sure that they look like they're from the same company. So again, employer branding is creating those assets that help you, on your career site, that help you on your social media channels, that helps you make sure that you're showcasing the visuals of that promise to your employees in a positive way will help your overall experience. And I think that a whole another webinar topic is really just on creative. And so we won't get to that today. We'll really talk about once you have your EVP set, once you've built your employer branding assets, how do I go out and activate my employer brand in the marketplace? And that's for us has been at this stage in this crazy recruiting cycle where it's incredibly difficult to find talent. That's what's the focus of this webinar is what do we do? How do we get our employer brand out into the marketplace? So whenever we talk about recruitment advertising, we always start with this continuum. Over on the bottom left, you have direct response advertising channels. I put my job description on Indeed. Maybe I sponsor that job on Indeed. And it's really clear that when people go to Indeed, they tend to have a higher level of intent. So we're optimistic that we're going to get a direct response to our offer of a job advertisement, and hopefully we get a much higher application completion rate because the people visiting that site or any of the job board sites have a much higher level of intent. When we talk about, and this was all pre-COVID as well, like we started talking about with people about, okay, how much money do you have? How many jobs do you have open? Where are the jobs, in the red zone, meaning harder to fill and all that kind of stuff, been open the longest? How do we build an advertising strategy around those? We really need to do direct response campaigns. But when we're opening a new location, when we're trying to provide some air cover for those direct response jobs, how do we do employer branding, and how do we do it really well on search engines and social media and eventually onto consumer marketing sites? I think that 2 years ago we were already in a tight job market. So if I go back even 3-4 years ago, if we were advertising anything from retail jobs to software engineering jobs, or really senior sales jobs, maybe we were paying, 50 cents a click, $1 a click for those kind of retail type jobs, and maybe $2 to $3 a click for engineering and sales jobs. And that was kind of what we were paying maybe on Indeed or ZipRecruiter or other job boards. Right now, 2 years ago, it was starting to get more and more expensive. After COVID, after the hiring resumed, after the COVID kind of initial scare, we started seeing things come back in September and October of 2020, where people were like, okay, we need bodies, we need to staff up, we need help. We started seeing the job board prices, the cost per click to advertise and earn that click from Indeed or ZipRecruiter or Glassdoor or LinkedIn back to our career site to try and get that completed apply, really started skyrocketing. I mean, they're in this right now, I would say they're anywhere from 50 to 100% higher than they were pre-COVID. So what that's done is it's made it really harder to earn an applicant. It's harder to earn a click back to your career site or your job description. And one of the things that was challenging about talking with clients about investing in employer branding on some of these channels that are up and further to the right was that it was expensive. And so what this market has done is kind of even the playing field a little bit. People are seeing more expensive costs on direct response channels. They're seeing more, it's difficult to get people to come through and apply there. So now it's made all of those consumer marketing, those employer branding channels more reasonable and from an investment perspective, and more likely that we could even get a conversion. So with that, I wanted to just address the job board marketplace. This is we talk about Indeed a lot, and we talk about some of the other alternatives in the marketplace, but I just want to make sure that people, Indeed has a completely dominant position, and it's as much as we might hear advertising for the ZipRecruiters, or we see the emergence of Talent.com. I mean, they're growing, they have a presence, but these stats are from December 2021. So really just, very, very recent statistics on how many unique visitors, how many pages per visit, and what the average duration of that visit is here. And so if you look at the reason why Indeed and Glassdoor are in the box, just in case, I assume everybody's aware, but if not, Recruit, which is a holding company out of Japan, has acquired both Indeed and Glassdoor. And the way they're being sold is kind of in a team selling environment now with Indeed and Glassdoor. So before we talk about, going on to employer branding on consumer sites, it's really important to measure ROI and build a case for advertising and getting your job board advertising really straightened out. In addition to that, Indeed has branding, opportunities. Glassdoor has branding opportunities. So there are things to think about as you're looking at your budget. I've got $1 to spend, right? And how much am I going to put towards the job boards? And as frustrating as it is to sometimes be beholden to a market leader like a Monster or Career Builder back in the day, or a LinkedIn or an Indeed, a LinkedIn and Indeed today, you've still got to, it's the devil, and the kind of devil you have to deal with. And not to call them a devil, but, in general, you want to really make sure that you've got your core job board spend really cranking. And it's important to note that, this is the scale at which Indeed and Glassdoor combined control the marketplace. And Kevin, it's up to you and Ron on whether you want to do questions during. I don't mind doing questions while we go through this versus holding them all to the end.
No, that's fine. I think you did answer one of them about who owns Indeed and Glassdoor, which is Recruit, right?
Yes. Yep.
So you answered that one. And then the question did come, I was just curious about why don't you include LinkedIn on this group?
Yeah, it's certainly something I can do. The tool only limits it to 5 advertising channels, and so to 5 domains. It's certainly something that afterwards I can either add a note or put another, grab another screenshot and add it there. But it's LinkedIn is larger than Indeed because it has a lot of news and social content. I believe it's probably about 100% larger than based on where we're looking at the market. Actually, I'll go to the next. Maybe not this one. It's in a couple.
It was slides. So you just didn't include it. That was all. That was the bottom line.
That's all. Yeah. Certainly available and certainly could include that for sure. And I'm not looking at the questions. So so just jump in with them if you feel like they're contextually appropriate.
You got it.
All right. So when we started talking about, okay, if we figure out what we're spending on job boards and LinkedIn, where can we activate our employer brand? And again, going back to the experience at Monster, when I started the company, we came from consumer marketing. And so we always felt like we wanted to be a consumer marketing shop that just happens to focus on recruiting and talent acquisition. Because if we walk and talk and act like consumer agencies, then we use all of those tools available to us that a consumer agency would be. So from the very early days, we always talked about going beyond job boards and figuring out like, how do we add these to our recruitment marketing mix? So when we talk about employer branding, we're talking about consumer sites. How do we find people on news and weather and sports and hobbies and social and all that kind of good stuff? And so to give you some sense of scale, I'm going to actually go, where did it go? Oh, God, sorry. So right now, when we talk about consumer sites versus job board sites, we looked at the overall unique visitors for all of 2001 based on a website called SEM Rush. And basically, when we take LinkedIn, Indeed, and Glassdoor and compare that to the top 50 visited websites on the internet, Glassdoor wasn't even in the top 50, but between Indeed, LinkedIn, and Glassdoor, they represent less than 2% of the time spent online. And so when we think about that for a second, I think we get very focused on our little industry in our little world. And so to think that we're spending all this time and money and effort trying to find candidates on the 2% of the internet time that people are spending there, it means that we're leaving a lot of opportunity on the table. And because we're in this unique market where it's become double the cost on job boards, and to be frank, the labor market is just not as motivated to go out and search. That means that we have to leave some of those traditional channels active and operating so we can make sure we get some ROI, but it's really forced us to go out and do more for clients. And so, a client that had never done an employer branding campaign last year said, hey, I want to spend $100,000 in these 6 markets trying to promote my employer brand. And so when we do that, that's certainly something that we, sorry, I apologize for that. Certainly something that we go through, we build out a customized plan, we target, we check out, the overall demographics, and then we would put the plan together and say, let's activate in these markets. And so in those 6 markets, if we're trying to look for what do we want to target on, we can target based on location. We can target based on demographics, whether that's occupation and income. We can focus on, the things that are lifestyle components. What are they interested in? Are they interested in GMC vehicles? Are they interested in Disney? Can we target contextual information through their behaviors? And the last one is really interesting too. A lot of people may have tried retargeting in the past, but what we're seeing in the consumer marketing world is how do we securely leverage first-party data to then go out and target our job seekers. So, for example, one of the things that we're working on now is that, if you've got a database of 500,000 people who have applied to your jobs in the past, how do we take that and just like a consumer marketing brand would, if Tide has hundreds of thousands of people who've signed up for an email, or for coupons or whatever, how do they go out into the marketplace and target those folks? And so that's what we're also trying to do as well. How do we just kind of, instead of putting a retargeting tag on our career page and building an audience, how do we take that database, securely upload it into a data lake is what's the term that's been used on the consumer side, and make sure we take that information and target those people out in the marketplace. So one of the things here when we talk about employer branding is how well do you know what your target applicant looks like? And that means how well do you know your existing employees, and how do we leverage all that information to then go out into the marketplace? One of the things that we wanted to, as we talk about what kinds of sites we would want to target, what types of campaigns do we want to launch, I just wanted to feature a few metrics here from a campaign that we did. That's basically, we went out and decided to launch campaigns on Reddit. And again, people are spending a significant amount of time on Reddit. It's a pretty popular site for a pretty varied set of content. And so how do we actually go out and do targeted ads for, that people can see on their laptop, desktop, or how to target them on their mobile device? But basically, here are some, actual results from a campaign. And if I won't read them all bullet for bullet, but at the bottom, when you look at the click-through rate, we were given benchmarks from Reddit on that's what CTR stands for, the click-through rate for our employer branding ads on Reddit compared to the average ad click-through rate. So it's a 0.17% versus a 0.08%. So to me, what that means, that click-through rate's double when we're putting employer branding ads in front of the general audience on Reddit. We targeted it at certain categories and posts and things like that we worked with the client on to identify as relevant areas that we thought we might find talent. But to get double the click-through rate, it was pretty astounding accomplishment. And as you can see there on the copy, it's we're also targeting and promoting higher engineering jobs. And so this campaign had a banner ad and some content that went from we're hiring software engineers to a landing page that led to lead capture versus a full apply. And then the recruiting team was poised and ready to go because these are really valuable leads. In addition, the second benchmark is the average CPM that is typically seen during Reddit media buys is $6.50, and we realized something that was a little more than half of that. So we got better performance, lower rates, and in case anyone's not familiar with it, CPM stands for a cost per 1,000 views on any type of media property. So in order for us to get this software engineering employer branding ad in front of 1,000 people, it costs us $342, whereas the average on Reddit is $650 to reach 1,000 people. So just wanted to include that. Another breakdown of that Reddit campaign is that we wanted to put it into certain audience categories. And that way you could just, again, get a sense of like what's available, right? When we're putting a lot of ads on job boards, it's just, did they click on the job or did they not click on the job? So what we're able to do here is we're able to, split the campaigns into which audience category were we trying to reach. So careers, gaming, sports, and IT topics were the different categories that we popped them into. And we just were able to split the campaign pretty evenly. We had it, over-indexed a little bit on the gaming side. But you could see, the cost, the CPM, the cost per thousand, Reddit visitors to reach was pretty even as well. And so this is just gives us a lot of information to digest in a far more detailed way because we're using consumer advertising sites. And, these campaigns are pretty easy to activate, whether a lot of clients that we've run into sometimes don't have the ability to build out these banner ads or build out landing pages. For us, it doesn't really matter if you wanted to if a client wants to do that creative and do the banner ads and do the landing pages on their own, or if they need help doing that, that's something we can do. Typically, just make sure that we get proper brand guidelines, and that way we can, again, stay in line and be true to the corporate brand as we activate these employer branding campaigns.
Hey, Neil.
Yeah.
It's Kevin. Yeah. So a question came up. What was the type of client and or jobs for this Reddit campaign? Were they tech positions? Were they? And I'm sorry if we missed it.
No, it's all good. It's basically a major national retailer that has tech jobs.
Got it.
So, I think that's part of the reason why they needed this. They wanted to leverage employer branding is that they really, if you're a large retailer, there's a lot of technology behind the scenes that people just don't know about. And so that's really where that's the genesis of the campaign is like, let's tell the story about how we could how we offer really challenging and interesting technology careers.
Got it. And this was North American based, right? US
Correct.
Based.
Yeah, this was North American based. They had given us specific geographies. They'd also started allowing some remote work. So we targeted tech centers like, they're based in the Midwest. So we did some campaigns in RTP in the North Carolina Research Triangle Park area there, some Bay Area stuff as well. So, we really tried to, again, hone in on, the challenge with job boards is you're kind of at the mercy where whoever applies for your job, it's hard, it's difficult to do geo-targeting beyond where you place a job posting, right?
Sure.
If I place a job posting in Boston, Mass, then I can do a radius around that. You can create multiple options, but in the consumer marketing world, we have all of that at our disposal. We can go down to zip codes. We can go down to, city, state, metropolitan areas, all that kind of good stuff.
Got it. Thanks, Neil.
Yep. This was a second campaign. This is actually a large North American-based insurance company. And so in this particular case here, I just wanted to give you a breakdown. I couldn't give you the advertising channels, but they are all consumer marketing channels. But again, across the top here, you can see it's a pretty significant investment, 6.6 million impressions, and almost 50,000 clicks on these campaigns. And if anyone on the call is looked at an Indeed report recently, and you look at a cost per click, a $2.14 cost per click is pretty reasonable. Now, when you look down at the number of clicks, right, on some of the different channels and the cost per click by channel, we can start to really see different dynamics happening here. So I'm going to look at the last column on the right-hand side where it's, a cost per click. And when you have $1.25 cost per click for something that's that might be something along the lines of like an AdWords type campaign. And I can tell you that, we, in this particular campaign, we did use Amazon advertising. We've been activating campaigns on Amazon in order to get out there. And that's probably one of the more expensive channels that we've used. And the intent is to try and, reach people again, when they're spending time on Amazon. Now when you put together these campaigns to do employer branding, if you're trying to reach, we have Cracker Barrel as a client. If you're trying to reach, kitchen staff for Cracker Barrel, you may not want to use Amazon because I don't know how many people have Prime in that particular case. But if you are targeting, salespeople that are, looking for, independent insurance agent opportunities, this, targeting Amazon and Amazon Prime members is certainly a good way to do that. Okay. Um, Again, just another campaign overview. In this particular case, we spent about $77,000, and this is for a Canadian financial services company. We were trying to target people who had mortgage backgrounds and underwriters and things along those lines. So here, what we found was the spend was, again, in the same ballpark. We're seeing people for 3 to 6 month campaigns use this kind of $50 to $100 to $200,000 to do to underwrite a specific initiative when they're trying to do campaigns. About 5.5 million impressions. The CPM on this one was $14. But in the end, we still ended up driving 17,000 clicks to a site over a period of 4 months. So that it's really a pretty significant bump in the activity you're seeing. Whenever we run these employer branding campaigns, it's worth noting that, as I mentioned earlier, that we're typically sending them to some sort of lead capture page. So if you have a CRM that you can grab name, email, maybe another couple, qualifying questions, I think that is really the way to go when you do employer branding. Trying to have a full-blown apply is pretty risky. I think you do get some of those, and if that's your only option, that's certainly worth doing. We've had clients that have put a landing page together that has the kind of light lead capture that someone's ready for. Again, the difference is they're on a weather site, they're on a news site, they're not on Indeed with their resume profile already ready to go. They're basically doing something else, and we've captured their interest enough to get them to come to our landing page. Now, if they fill out that light landing page, you could always when someone fills out the form and clicks submit, on the thank you page of that, we've worked with clients to put individual job listings that go directly into an applicant tracking system that says basically, thanks for your information. If you're interested in applying to a specific job, click on one of these links here. So there's certainly ways to drive people back to the applicant tracking system, but to go from a ESPN, Food Network type environment and click on something and end up on a Taleo page or a greenhouse page is sometimes shocking, to some degree. So with that, I'll open it up for questions, Kevin.
Excellent. Thanks, Neil. That is what's interesting on a related note. It's not exactly some of the measurement that you were talking about, but when we think about when you were sharing the what was it, 2% of in our world and recruiting and hiring kind of related sites compared to the rest of the consumer world, right? That being leveraged. There's in our data every year. Yes, the employers, of course, are using Indeed and a lot of the sites that you had talked about here, but there's this disconnect as well with how much that they're spending time and resources and maybe even money on like Facebook and Twitter, for example. And candidates tell us they rarely use those for job related things at all, right? For that matter. So it's kind of a related note in the sense of, understand what's being utilized where, but also, so how would you recommend then, like what's step one in this regard? Like we've just been spraying and praying money everywhere. What do I do first?
Yeah, I think that the important thing to do first is to make sure that I said that the reason why I put the Indeed stuff at the beginning is to make sure that job board spend is buttoned up. Right. I think that a lot of people have put those campaigns on cruise control, because once I do that and I know that okay, I'm getting an efficient return on those dollars, now I can go off and experiment. When we were at Monster, we used to have we're trying to get people to submit a resume and post a resume. So I had to spend, 80% of my budget just making sure that we're getting fresh inventory, right? Sure. To me, it was always like a perishable product, right? We need people to add a resume, update a resume, take some sort of resume action. So we have fresh inventory for clients who've bought job postings and resume database access. The other 20% of the budget was to go out and see what else is possible. How do we go out and find signs of life somewhere else in order to drive applicants in this particular case? So I think that a lot of people, don't realize that they're already doing some consumer marketing if they're active on Facebook and social media channels.
Sure.
So that's a really good start. If you're doing that already, you have some sort of baseline metrics of when someone's not on a job board with a high level of intent, maybe they're on Facebook, maybe you've done Instagram or Snapchat or TikTok, and we've tested all those channels. Maybe you've done some of that. So you actually have some consumer, if you're doing that, you have some consumer baseline metrics that you can compare. For us, I'd say that if a client's talking to us, we're talking about, 15, in total, like if they're, sorry, I just saw a number come across, and I apologize for not shutting this off. Basically, I would say that we have somewhere in the range of like 3 channels. 3 channels is where we start, Kevin, Spotify, YouTube, and banner ads.
Sure.
And when we decide to do banner ads, like if you tried to go to ESPN or you tried to go to, CNN direct, they're going to charge you like $20, $30, $50,000 a month. You just can't get in on those direct.
Right.
So, I mean, to me, YouTube and Google are Google Display are some of the best places to go.
Got it. Okay. No, that's great. So, and before too many people flee, Neil, how do they get in touch with you?
Best case is, it's neil@hireclicks.com, or LinkedIn is probably the best way to get a hold of me. For sure.
Got it.
Yeah.
Excellent. And then also, do you have any metrics on, this is always a good question, but always hard to measure, quality of the candidate flow, such as cost per hire for people that have made it all the way through the talent pipeline from the point of discovery? I mean, those kinds of metrics, do you track those too for clients?
We do, in all of our campaigns, whether they're campaigns on job boards or campaigns, on consumer advertising channels, we're basically trying to make sure that we follow them through the applicant tracking system. Okay. So, when we do those campaigns, we basically have, someone who cost per apply, cost per quality apply, which is, measured on the ATS state, and then cost per hire. So as much as possible, we're trying to actually make sure that we capture all of those downstream quality metrics.
Got it. Thanks, Neil. A couple more questions. You talked about the relationship with marketing departments, which is definitely key if you can develop that relationship, for sure. What can we do in talent acquisition to help us? So they're always too busy, and that's something else I've heard many times over the years too, right? They're too busy. That said that we can leverage their branding knowledge. Any suggestions would be great. So I guess what is, how do you better partner with marketing and get them to stop saying they're so busy?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, the number one thing that a corporate brand marketing person is worried about is risk, is using the logo in the wrong way, is, an ad shows up next to, a negative kind of site. So what we do, number one is making sure that we all, talk about the process and getting approvals, and talk about, just by when we start a relationship with a corporate marketing team and our TA leader has introduced us to those folks, that to us is like the start of a journey. And just by them taking the meeting, it's really important. And so what we always talk about is, can we please have the brand standards? So we use the right fonts, we use the logo in the right way. I mean, brand standards, it sounds like this crazy thing, but any, significant size company probably has corporate brand standards. Yeah, it just means, right. And just telling them that you're going to follow that and be asking for them and saying you're to be compliant is really the baseline of what you need to get started. And, if they don't have the time to do it, getting a partner that, like, when we work with them, we tell them we're going to follow these standards. We're going to then work a approval process in, so that way you're aware of what goes out the door before it goes out the door. I think that's a big key as well. And then I think over time, you just build up trust. They start to see the work, just like any outside vendor they might use. They become more and more comfortable. So it does take time, because it's like any other relationship.
Got it. Yeah. Excellent. Thank you, Neil.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's been, as we all know, in industries that have just been hit so hard the past few years, especially during COVID. And the airline industry is no exception to that, right? And
Yep.
so, what would you suggest to an airline's branding team, right? Employer branding team
Yeah.
today? What are some recommendations that you would make today for them?
I mean, I think that, in the particular case of the airline industry, I mean, it's the people that make that experience, right? Whether it's, the pilot joking a bit, on the intercom, or someone, a flight attendant helping you, or, so I think that everybody wants to connect with other humans. And I think that we just need more authentic stories and, and authentic ways to get the word out there. So whether it's, a quick video that someone can capture, we've been talking a lot with a company called Job Pixel that does a really good job capturing videos. And, how do we get that out there? One of the channels I mentioned was YouTube, and you don't need a highly produced, video. You need 15 seconds, and 15 seconds of, a genuine person saying why they work there is like building half the bridge to get that other person to apply for that job.
Sure.
They appreciate that story. They find that story. They're curious enough to then take the next action. And I think when we mentioned at the beginning, like creative in TA is heavily stock photo based, and recruiting deserves better than that. And I think that's that difficult relationship between corporate marketing and recruiting has to break down at some point. And even like some of the discussions we're having now about employer branding campaigns, and and I get like Ad Week, from the just industry advertising news, employer branding, recruiting, these are all like hot topics on the marketing side. So you're going to get, I think that right now is the time to bridge that partnership, because they're coming and they're going to encroach on the TA space or recruiting side of the fence, and sometime soon. So.
Well, and I think it's important to note and point out, right, Neil, that you continue to have people leaving.
Yeah.
Like a regular stream of people leaving organizations. Candidate experience is not only a more critical differentiator from branding on, but it is so much more impacting businesses today. And again, people who have been in, and I'm sure you've heard this from clients as well, who have been in recruiting and hiring for 10, 15, 20 plus years. We've never seen this world before, right?
Yeah.
This is a very bizarre world.
It is. And it's and that's why it's so important to, start to build a plan, to try something else. Right. Because I mean, if people are, the job boards are great and they have a lot of value, but there's got to be other ways to attract talent, and we're planning for it now versus, hoping for branding dollars. We're saying it's you have to do branding, and here's why, and here's what you've just got to, you can't just, post on job boards and do pay-per-click or programmatic and hope for the best. It's just it's not a.
And even, and I feel for everybody, but every day I see, folks on LinkedIn, like, I'm hiring, anybody know anybody? It's like, that's not going anywhere.
Yeah. It's really, it's just tough. Like you can't do that. Like, and I think the more that we talk about, with our clients, like, what are we trying to do? Like in the end, like we're trying to help create a competitive edge for our clients, whether it's creative, whether it's a media plan strategy and branding, whether it's optimizing Indeed better than others. Like you've got to have a competitive edge. You can't just go through and do the same things, and it's just not going to work. I saw someone, asked or mentioned, they thought the ZipRecruiter numbers were really low. Like, ZipRecruiter does a great job of advertising, right? Monster was a disciple of this as well. Like they advertise like crazy, but that doesn't always mean, that it's going to turn into, the direct number of unique visitors. And, whatever the even though that, I think ZipRecruiter had 15 million unique visitors, you're still starting, okay, that's 15 million unique visitors. Then like, what about my geography? What about the job function I'm recruiting for? Like, it's just, the pipe gets really small, really fast.
Well, and isn't it true though that even compared to the likes of Indeed and Glassdoor, et cetera, ZipRecruiter still plays down market more than SMB?
Yeah, I feel like the SMB space is where, again, in a lot of their advertising, they're showcasing, employers that are at the SMB level. I think, all of them, even, I don't know if you've seen it or not, like during the NFL playoffs, we've seen LinkedIn do, effectively what I would consider job board advertising.
Right.
And for how many years did LinkedIn say like, oh no, we're not a job board, right? And then you see an NFL, ad that's $1 million a pop, talking about how you should look for a job on LinkedIn. So it's, I think ZipRecruiter is definitely further downstream, and but at this point you got to try everything and really build your own proprietary data. Does ZipRecruiter work for me? And if I'm in 20 markets, maybe it only works in 12. So that means I need to find alternatives for the other 8 markets, and that's the level of detail that people really need to start looking at in their recruitment marketing data.
Agreed. This is a great question because it's always, how do you make the business case, right? So if this person's, like if I'm spending 100,000 plus on employer brand recruitment marketing campaign, and I need to ask for that. I need to go to leadership and ask for that. What are some of the key selling points that, obviously you got to put some data together to make your case, right? Yeah. So what would you recommend? How do you build that business case? Where do you start?
Yeah. So, for us, it becomes, okay, let's again, use that $100,000 base. We want to figure out what markets, the geographies are probably probably the most important thing to define at that very early stage.
Yeah.
If someone says I have $100,000 and I want to advertise in these 25 markets, now we're talking about $4,000 a market, and that's just not going to make a dent when it comes to employer branding. So what we're trying to do is basically use, the $100,000, if we can use it in 3 to 6 markets, maybe. Now we have, and depending on how long we want that to run, we would typically do a 60 or 90-day test. And we feel like that gives us enough baseline data on employer branding campaigns to then show what's working, what's not working. And so what you get for that $100,000 is you're going to want to use, basically we use CPM as a metric in those campaigns, and that's the number of impressions we're going to get into that marketplace. So, Glassdoor or Indeed, they charge a $40 CPM. So in order to get in front of 1,000 people, for their branding products, it's $40. And so if I can find, I would use anywhere between $20 and $40 CPM. So in that particular case, we're talking about 5 to 10 million impressions. And so now if I've got, let's just say it's 10 million impressions, I can get 2 million impressions in 5 different markets, over the course of 30, 60, or 90 days. That's a pretty good test, and that's how I'd back into it. Now, when someone says, "Well, I need 50 hires," well, that's going to be without any baseline data. That's going to be challenging to go and make that. I would be uncomfortable making that promise. I would say that, we can use the CPMs. This is the exposure and the branding you're going to get. We could use an estimated click-through rate and say, okay, if we use 0.1% click-through rate, 1 in every, 1,000 people is going to click on it. Every 1,000 people that see it are going to click on it. Now I've got how many people come to my career site, which you saw, even with those numbers, you're talking about tens of thousands of clicks to a career site or a, lead gen page. And from there, you can start to use your own metrics. When someone comes to our landing page, how many turn into a full apply? What percentage from the full apply turn into a hire? So maybe that's 10% and 10% again, then you can start to get some of your own numbers.
Got it. Thanks, Neil, for sharing that. I hope that was helpful to Stephanie, who asked the question. Yeah. Anybody else have any other final questions before we wrap up?
Well,
I don't think so.
Okay. Any other details? Again, please connect with me on LinkedIn, and happy to help in any way.
Yes, absolutely. Neil, thanks again so much. And everybody, thanks for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day.
Sounds good. Thank you for everything, Kevin. Appreciate it, Rob, and Rachel on our team for coordinating everything.
Got it.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.